Morning, folks. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, back down here at the Pathfinder Outdoor Classroom. And I'm back with another in our series, Buy It Before It's Gone, talking about military surplus. And again, military surplus in the civilian market for camping and outdoor use has been around since the time of Francis Bannerman, right after the American Civil War. So it's nothing new for people to use surplus gear in the field. I have some pieces of military surplus that I'm really fond of. Some of them are easier to get than others, but we've been talking about them in the first two parts of this video series, and today I wanted to continue on. Now, one of the first things I want to talk about in this video, which may lead to another video down the road, depending on the comments in this video. All right, so we've already talked about two different backpacks. We talked about the Alice pack and frame. We talked about the Molly 2 patrol pack. And there's a couple other packs that I'm really fond of, so I want to make sure that I at least throw a pack in every one of these videos. So I'm going to show you a pack today that a lot of people may not have ever seen. So this is the Harrison Falcon Radio Ruck. And it has the same Alice straps on it that the Alice pack has. Same attachment situation. But it's specifically designed for a radio. It's designed for a military radio, obviously, but it fits the ICOM IC7200 like a glove. And that's why I got a hold of this pack. This one is new old stock. So this one is almost in brand new condition. But it has a section down here for cabling and things like that. It has a large section on the inside for the radio. It has a separate pouch on the bottom that's divided for the battery. It has compartments on the side for antenna gear and things like that. It has places in the top lid for microphones and other small cables and things that may go in there, and manuals, things like that, band plans, all those type of things. So when you get a little closer look at this Harrison Falcon Radio Ruck, it's a really cool specialty ruck. Right, so you've got a clear pouch here. You can put your microphone. You've got a large pouch here that the radio actually buckles into to secure it. And a 7200 with a cage on it fits in here absolutely perfect for that. It's got a separate compartment at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that or not. That's got a flap here with straps that keep it from falling through, and they snap. So you can put a battery underneath there, inside, put that flap down over the top of your battery, drop your radio on top of that, buckle it in so it can't move, and then close the ruck. So if you've got a front face radio, like the 7200 with a cage on it that fits in there perfect, you've got a ruck that you can operate out of that will hold a lot of stuff. And again, you know, this thing's military grade, so it's definitely bulletproof. And you've got large pockets on the side here where you can put antennas and things like that if you need to. I would generally just run a long wire off something like this, so I wouldn't have to worry about any large antenna components or anything that might break or be bendable and things like that that may get bent. So I would just keep a long wire antenna in this thing. But with the 7200, you got a killer 100-watt system that you can carry in a backpack like this very, very easily. If you want to see a video of that Harrison Falcon Radio Ruck set up with the IC7200 in the field for field use with some kind of a long wire antenna or something like that, I'd be happy to set that up and show you. Not a problem at all. Just make comments down below in this video and we'll get right after that. Now, the next thing I want to look at in this video is the M1942 Mountain Cook Stove and the Mountain Cook set that goes along with that stove. Okay, so this is the M1942, and it came in a canister like this, and this one's dated 45 here, or it was part of the Mountain Cook set, and it could be stored inside the Mountain Cook set. To do that, it couldn't be in the can. You had to store just the stove itself inside the Mountain Cook set. Now, this stove is, again, I said it 5 years ago. If I could pick one stove, and I was only allowed one stove to have for the rest of my life, this bad boy here would be the one, okay? This one is an Aladdin. It's the M42 mod, and it is a very, very good stove. So it's got fold-out legs on it here. It's got a ring that drops down when you pick the legs up, and that ring drops down and supports those legs, okay? So it's a very simplistic system, very much like a Coleman stove. All of those stoves were developed after these kind of stoves, all right? You pumped it just like a Coleman stove. You opened the gas just like a Coleman stove. And when you did that, it would start to get the cup wet. And you could then light the stove. And when you turn the switch on, it's going to release more. So right now you're in pre-light mode. You're warming everything up so it will draw. So it's starting to warm up now, and I've opened up the valve for the top. And it's beginning to draw and jet. Still burning off some gas down here in the bottom of the bowl. In the priming bowl at the bottom, you can see that yellow flame. When that burns out, everything will be drawing from the top jet. It's got a nice wide space on it that was made for this Mountain cook set. You can see this Mountain cook set sits on there just perfect. It basically fills the gap right there. And the reason there's a little bit of space there is because you had the pan, stainless steel pan that went on top of that, and that almost fills the gap completely between the legs, okay? There's very little play there, so it couldn't fall off when it was moving around. So you've got a little bit of play in the larger pot. Okay, so that M1942 stove basically just folds up and goes into a sleeve. Now, it was made to be carried in a sleeve, or you could use it separately with this Mountain cook set. And this Mountain cook set here is brand new. It's never even been used, and it's from 1951. The one I was messing with today is another set that I've got that's missing the inner pot. The way this is set up, it has a, let me open this thing up real quick here for you so you can see. The way this is set up, it has a stainless steel pan. Leaves a little bit to be desired because it's pretty thin stainless steel. But it's got a handle on it that gives you offset so you can cook over the stove with it, and it fills up the stove really, really well as far as the legs on the stove go. The way this is set up, it has two pots. It has an inner pot that's smaller, and it has an outer pot. So there you go. So you get two pots with this cook set. One that fits inside the other. So once you put the secondary pot back in, the primary pot, the way it was meant to be carried as a set was with the stove inside. The stove fit very tightly inside there. Once you had the stove inside, you just put the lid on, and basically it had two ears at the bottom here that locked it in place. So when you closed it, you had an enclosed cook system, okay? And that was a Squad Mountain cook set. The only thing I don't really like about that is if this thing leaks any fuel, and just the smell of the fuel, you get that on your pots on the inside if you carry it that way. So for myself, I just assume carry it in this container that I'm never gonna use to cook out of. It's very protective of the stove. It's never gonna let the stove get damaged. It's a little heavier that way, obviously, but that stove is bulletproof. And then carry this cook set, and you can put other things inside, a coffee mug, some kind of a washcloth, something like that, some other cook items, seasonings, that type stuff, and then you can lock that thing together, and you've got a self-contained cook set there, okay? So it's a really good system when you combine them together, but even separated, they work great. This Mountain cook set's a great cook set. I actually gave a brand new one of these, just like this, to another YouTuber who uses it quite often on YouTube. Although I noticed he burnt one of the pots up, and that comes from leaving it over a fire with no liquid in it, because it is aluminum, all right? It was never meant to be used like that. It was really meant to be used with the stove. However, as long as you got liquid in it, you're not gonna hurt the aluminum. The steel skillet obviously is stainless steel, so it's more impervious to fire. But this is pretty much a bulletproof stove, and again, I'll say it one more time in this video. If I was stuck to one single burner stove for the rest of my life, this Aladdin M1942 mod would definitely be the one. Okay, so we've been trying to kind of stay with 5-ish items in these videos. And we've talked about 3 of them already. We talked about the Harrison Falcon radio ruck. We talked about the M1942 mod stove and the Mountain cook set. The next one I'd like to talk about is the Pilot's Survival Knife by Camellus, okay? This knife is pretty much bomb-proof. I mean, it's not full tang, but I have never witnessed one of these break. I have witnessed K-bars being broken before. I have never witnessed one of these being broken. It's a good short blade. It's not much bigger than your hand, so it's a good utilitarian style. It's got guards on it to keep you from sliding up on the blade if you're stabbing into something or hammering it into a tree or something like that. It's got nice leather grip on it that just gets better with age. A nice leather sheath with a protection of metal on the bottom of the sheath that wraps all the way around. And it has a sharpening stone built in, okay? To me, if you're gonna buy a military style survival knife, this is the one. This is the one. Of all of them that I've used and all of them that I've seen, this is definitely the one, okay? It's an Air Force knife. And again, all the surplus we're talking about in these videos is US surplus. I'm not getting into foreign country surplus, only US stuff, all right? But of all the US style survival knives, this one right here is definitely my favorite. Okay, the next 2 items I want to talk about are compasses. And compasses are one of those things where the more complicated the compass is, the more things it will probably do for you. But if you don't need to do those things, then you don't need that complicated of a compass. At the same time, depending on your mental bandwidth, you may not need a more complicated compass. You may need something very, very simple. There are 2 compasses that are used in the military for the most part, or have been used historically, that I want to talk about today. One of them is the M2 surveyor's type compass or engineering style compass. And the other one is the Kaminga military compass. So we'll look at both of those side by side. All right, so this compass is the M2 engineering style compass. This is very much like a Brunton surveying style compass, all right? It is made for things like slope, grade, precision navigation, finding corners. If you're doing survey work or something like that, this is a great compass to have. Obviously, if you're doing field artillery work, this is a great compass to have. If you're checking grade and slope, this is a great compass to have. If you're just exploring property boundaries and things like that, this is a good compass to have. However, it's a very complicated compass. So generally speaking, with a compass like this, it's kind of backwards intuitively, the way you would hold it, because you would generally hold the north side of the compass in front of you like this. And obviously the north side is facing south because we're backwards, okay? And these are meant to be read basically backwards. I don't want to go over the whole engineering style compass thing right now with you because it's a little complicated. But what I would tell you is that you can still buy these fairly inexpensively, new old stock, for about $100. And I would tell you that if you're ever going to do any type of survey work, land surveys, geological work, things like that, this is a good thing to have in your arsenal or in your toolbox. It comes with a nice heavy-duty plastic case, and it has an Alice clip on the back of it, as well as a belt clip built in, so you can wear it on your belt. And if you understand how to use this style compass, you can do anything with this compass you can do with any other compass. There's just a learning curve to it, I guess is the word for it. There's a learning curve to using a compass of this style, all right? It's more complicated than most people will need. But again, depending on what you're doing, you may have a need for a compass like this. The next compass we'll talk about, and this is in a military grenade pouch, and I find this to be a really good pouch as well, since we're talking about military surplus items. You can still get these fairly readily, and they fit the Cammenga style compass really, really well. They also will fit a regular base plate compass and a couple notebooks, things like that, reference cards. So these are a good compass case that you can buy fairly readily and fairly inexpensively. Now this Cammenga here is a 1977, I believe. So just post-Vietnam era. You can still buy these Cammenga compasses brand new. However, the company's not owned by Mac Cammenga anymore. When this compass was made, it was owned by Mac Cammenga. And this is a military issue compass from 1977, new old stock, okay? This compass has more of a learning curve in my mind than a regular base plate compass. It measures mils as far as the clicks go. They're in mils, not degrees, which is more complicated as well, and much more accurate than you would ever need for land navigation. Really, land navigation to 2 degrees is the best you're gonna get. And 1 mil is multiple degrees. So this is way more accurate than you'd ever need for land nav. However, for things in the military like field artillery calling for fire, the same thing with a compass like this, those mils become important because it's a more precise type measurement, okay? This one has a floating disc inside of it. Instead of something that is just a needle floating, it actually has a disc that floats inside of it. It's a very, very good compass. The hold on these compasses is completely different than a base plate compass. And I can show you that here in just a minute. But these compasses will do anything you need to do. They have a line basically on the bezel ring itself that glows in the dark. That's right here. That goes over the top of the north side of the needle to give you needle in the doghouse. If you're trying to travel in a straight line, obviously you have a glow in the dark mark right here that goes over the top of the glow in the dark mark to give you needle in the doghouse, and that gives you straight line travel. Your sighting device on this is a small magnifying glass with a sight window here and a wire that goes through the middle of this window to give you sight alignment in the distance to give you an accurate bearing, okay? You don't really have a mirror to look into. You have a magnifying glass. You look over the top of the bezel in. We'll talk about that in just a minute as well. When you fold this thing up, basically it just folds down. The top comes over, and the thumb loop goes over the top, and then you just roll it up basically and throw it in the case, and you're ready to rock and roll. It doesn't take up a lot of room. It's not that heavy. It's a very heavy-duty compass. If you're looking for something that's heavy-duty that you're probably never going to tear up, I would say this is a good compass for you. If you're looking for something for land nav, this is less optimal in most ways than a base plate compass like a Silver Ranger or a Sunto MC2 is today. Okay, so this Lensatic military compass by Cammenga. You have what's called a thumb loop right here that you can put your thumb through on the bottom right here that folds up. And that thumb loop is so that you can slide your thumb in there and hold that basically on top of your hand, just like this. And so when you open this, what you do is, to get a sight window, basically you're looking through this V to this crosshair. And what you do is you bring this thing up close to your face, unlike a base plate compass, which you want to put out in front of you. With this one, you bring it up near your eye so that you can read in the magnifying glass the numbers on the dial. The advantage to a compass like this is, because it has a magnifying glass that actually moves, you can move that magnifying glass up and down a little bit until you can read the numbers on the dial if you are farsighted, okay? Then you can still use the sighting right up against your face like this, closing your non-dominant eye and aiming with your dominant eye to a very small window. And that's the difference between a V sight and a straight line sight like this with a crosshair in the middle of it, is that the further you get those V sights away, the less margin for error there is, okay? With this, the closer you get this to your face is pretty much the only way you're gonna be able to see this hairline in here. You've got to get this thing right up on top of you to be able to see that hairline, and the gap is so small, it takes away a lot of your margin of error. So you'll aim that thing at something, keeping it level, and you'll adjust this until you can read the numbers on the dial. And that's where you're going to take your degree reading at. So I'm looking at about 310 degrees of azimuth straight in front of me to where I'm aiming this compass. Now, what you have to remember with this, again, back to the fact between the difference between this and a base plate compass, the degree readings, not the mil readings, the mil readings are on the outside in black, degree readings on the inside in red, are 5 degree increments. They're not 2 degree increments like a bezel ring on something like a Sunto MC2. So you've got 5 degrees of margin of error between lines instead of 2 degrees. There's a little bit of a difference there too. Once you get used to using a compass like this, it's very, very good. It's very accurate. You can use them with maps, but again, there's no adjustable declination on this compass either. So you have to do all the math in your head when you're going compass to map or map to compass. So you just adjust the map declination with the compass on it, and then you can take readings off the map and not have to worry about it. You can check all that stuff out in my navigation series to figure out how all of that's done. However, in my mind, this is one of the best compasses that you can possibly buy. However, it's not the compass we used to teach with here at school, because I don't think it's the most accurate or teachable for the majority of people. Okay, guys, so listen, we've talked about 5 items already. We talked about the Mountain Cook set. We talked about the Mountain Cook stove, the M1942 mod. We talked about the Camelus Air Force survival knife. We talked about the 2 compasses, which is actually 1 item when we talk about compass. And we talked about the Harrison Falcon radio rucksack, okay? I'm gonna give you a bonus again in this video. We're gonna talk about one more thing that kind of goes along with rucksacks. Although I do have one more rucksack I wanna show you in another video in part 4. We'll get there, don't worry. So the last item I want to talk to you about today is military dry bags, okay? This is the old style military dry bag that went inside the Alice pack. And this is new old stock. This thing's in really, really good shape. It has a black rubber liner on the outside of a nylon shell, okay? This thing will hold water if it's a good one. They don't all smell really bad like a lot of people think they do. It just smells kind of rubbery, okay? But putting this inside of an Alice pack ensures that your stuff is going to be dry beyond a shadow of a doubt. And it's got tie strings attached to it so that you can tie it off like a cinch sack and just tie it off, all right? Roll it over and then tie it off. That's the best way to do it. You don't get any water inside. And this thing is a great waterproof bag. But it's an old school waterproof bag. Now, I kind of prefer that myself, all right? But, especially with an Alice pack. The newer dry bags that the military has, and this one is made by Sea Line Industries, and I believe this one was actually made for an IFLBE, I believe is the right nomenclature for that pack. And it has a release valve on it here so that once you put your stuff inside and you roll it down, you can relieve the air out of it to compress it, okay? It's a huge dry bag. And again, it will hold water as well. And it's a great resource for you. It's a little bit big in my mind for something like an Alice pack. Again, I think this was made for the large, I believe it's IFLBE pack, which is probably a 40 or 50 liter pack to begin with. And this might even be a 40 or 50 liter dry bag, to be honest with you. Let me see what it says on here, if it's got the liters on it. I don't see anywhere where it's got the liters on it, but it's huge. I would say it's definitely, I mean, it's almost the size of a duffel bag. So I'd say it's probably more like 50 liters. I'm probably way off on that. Somebody's going to correct me for sure in this video in the comments, but it's huge. Let's just leave it at that, okay? And it's got buckles on it so that when you roll it down, you fold it in half basically with 2 rubber spines on it, for lack of a better word, or stiffeners, and you roll it down and you just buckle it up, and then you can relieve the air out of it by opening this valve so that you don't have a bunch of air trapped in the bag, which gives it a little bit of an advantage over something like the older style bags have, because you can't release the air from them unless you kind of push them down before you cinch it, right? Then you can do that. This one will allow you to do both at the same time. And again, this valve just turns sideways and you can hear the air coming out of it, and then you turn it straight up and down to lock it off. So nothing wrong with this bag either. Great bag. My preference for an Alice pack is the other bag. However, you know, this thing is big enough that if you put air in this and locked it down and it didn't leak, that thing would probably float you beyond the shadow of a doubt if you had to make some kind of a water crossing. And I'd say that's a big advantage to a bag this size. We'll probably test that theory come this weekend at the On the Water's Edge survival course. All right, guys, listen, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, and I appreciate you joining me again out here today for part 3 of the video, Get It Before It's Gone. Again, some of this stuff is a little harder to find than other stuff. The radio Ruck, you can find it brand new old stock on the internet for about 80 or 90 bucks plus freight. The Mountain Cook sets, you can find them for 100 bucks, new old stock. If you look on places like eBay, you can find them used as well. They might be dented or beat up a little bit, but you can find them cheaper than that if you look. The M1942 stove, on the other hand, is a different ballgame. You can probably find 1 or 2 of them on eBay, but they're going to be $200+ if you do. The Camelus knife was made clear up until like the 80s. So they're still fairly readily, tongue twisted there. They are still fairly readily available. You just have to look, okay? And then things like the compass pouch that I use for the Kaminga, obviously those are readily available even on Amazon, I think. The M2 compass, you can still buy in new old stock condition, places like eBay for around 100 bucks. And a Cammenga compass can still be bought brand new. So that pretty much covers everything we talked about other than dry bags. And you can definitely get the C-Line style dry bags, brand new, I believe, new old stock. The older dry bags in really good condition are a little harder to find, okay? I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.